Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am happy to have you. We got boy, do we have a ton of stuff to cover today. And we need to begin with an update on the Hamas, Hezbollah, Israel situation. So I can bring you a greater depth how Israel pulled off the gender sex change operation for Hezbollah. On the sixth day, God created man and made him male and female. And in one day, Israel turned all the men into women, or eunuchs at least. Wow. They went from being Almond Joy bars to Mounds bars. Almond Joy got nuts, Mounds don't, or Hezbollah for that matter. Goodness gracious. The jokes write themselves on this. A lot of goats in Lebanon marked safe from Hezbollah today. Okay. So here, yes, I did just say that on radio, didn't I? Sorry. All right, here's what we now know. So the speculation yesterday from people I talked to was that this could have been, given the lack of deaths, just a bomb essentially generated by steam explosion that you can cause the batteries to overheat. And if they overheat rapidly enough, a lithium battery doesn't just set fire, it explodes. There's a steam buildup and combustion. Here's actually what happened. That was partly the case. But so this is a chess move by Israel. It's so chess and checkers. I'm not a chess guy. I never have been. I never learned the game. My son loves chess. He does chess club at school. He's very good. When he first started playing, and by the way, if you're a new dad, this is advice to you. When your kids start playing strategic games, beat the snot out of them regularly early on, and then they're not going to want to play with you because eventually they're going to get better than you and they're going to have no desire to play with you, beat your butt and hold it over your head. Beat them early, beat them often, and then they'll go find someone else to challenge chess. So that's what I did with my kid when he was first starting out. I just regularly beat him. And then, of course, my wife started to play with him, and she had to go buy a book and learn chess maneuvers. Checkers is pretty straightforward. I'm a checkers guy. I don't play poker. I'll play chess. I'm just not good at it, and I know I'm not good at it. I didn't even know how to play chess until I was like 45 years old. When my kids started playing, I was like, quick, I got to figure something out. So nonetheless, I digress. In chess, you tend to plan multiple moves ahead, not necessarily in checkers. You have ideas. You have different maneuvers. You have different patterns and the flow in chess based on how the other player's playing. You have strategies, and you want to be several steps ahead. So let's rewind. Months ago, Israel signaled that it was able to get into the cell phone network of Hezbollah, and they publicly leaked that information. The head of Hezbollah then issued an edict. No more cell phone communications. Israel's on to us. So the head of Hezbollah moved to pagers. Thousands of pagers. They ordered the pagers from Taiwan. Israel intercepted, we don't know where, we assume during the shipping process. Israel intercepted the order of pagers and injected a liquid explosive into the pagers that dries into crystal form. It's the same explosive that one of the plane bombers tried to bring down, Al-Qaeda bombers tried to bring down a jet. It's one of the reasons we're not allowed to have liquids of more than 3 ounces on planes these days. Even though at this point, the X-ray machines can detect it. The TSA wants a big bailout from the government. That's the only way they'll change us being able to take our full-size shampoo bottles on the plane again. So Israel injected it. It dried into crystal form. And here's the thing. When this particular explosive gets hot to a certain temperature, it blows up. So the pagers got to Hezbollah. And by the way, today the walkie-talkies are blowing up. Yesterday it was the pagers. Today it's the walkie-talkies, the two-way radios. So the pagers get distributed. What I was told by someone familiar with the situation yesterday is that Israel became concerned that they had been discovered yesterday. They were just into distribution. They had distributed about 4,000 to 5,000 of them. They were concerned that it was going to be discovered that Israel had compromised the pagers. So at 3:30 p.m. Beirut time yesterday, Israel sent a signal to all of the phones, and all of the phones, or all the pagers rather, and all the pagers exploded. 4,000 or so pagers exploded, killing just over a dozen members of Hezbollah. So here's how the explosion worked. The pagers all got a page. So if the Hamas operative was quick and grabbed his pager and held it up to see what the text message said, the explosion rendered him blind, if not dead. If the Hezbollah operative was slow and grabbed his pager, it blew his hand off. He either bled to death, or was maimed. If the Hezbollah operative was too slow, he got neutered. Because where do you keep your pager? By the way, as an aside, my kids are thoroughly impressed with the Israelis, but I had to explain to my 15-year-old what a pager was. So Israel either blinded, blew off a hand, blew off testicles, or killed over 4,000 to 5,000 members of Hezbollah. Now, here's the additional brilliance of the situation. Is, in addition, what Israel had now is a pattern map. Every one of those explosions of every one of those pagers was tied to someone working with Hezbollah. It was very interesting. A Norwegian reporter yesterday was outraged that one of his friends from Lebanon, his backpack blew up with a pager inside. How dare Israel target random Lebanese? And the community notes on Twitter were hysterical for this reporter that, dude, your friend's a terrorist. Did you not know? Israel now has this map. Israel now knows who all the terrorists are, where they are, what level of damage was done to them. And then today, Israel fired up the signal again and blew up the walkie-talkies, the two-way radios. All over Lebanon today, walkie-talkies, two-way radios are blowing up. Many of those aren't carried on people's hands. They're on their bikes. They're in their cars and motorcycles around Lebanon incinerated today with two-way radios in them. It's pretty impressive if you ask me. It's an incredible operation. Israel did a remarkable good job. Side note, and I think you have to note as a side note here, what a remarkable intelligence failure led to October 7th, 2023. The Israeli defense and intelligence operations got lazy and went to sleep. And Hamas was able to invade on October 7th, killing over 1,200 Israeli citizens. Israel got lazy and started relying on electronic surveillance, not human intelligence and human surveillance. And the electronic surveillance could not detect the Hamas parachutists flying across the fence. Human surveillance could have. The intelligence officials have had to wake back up after October 7th, and I don't think they'll go back to sleep after this. They will not rest on their laurels. There is smoke rising in various parts of Lebanon, as it appears now thousands of Hezbollah-linked walkie-talkies have blown up simultaneously around the country. This is happening right now. I'm watching live video around Lebanon as these walkie-talkies began blowing up today. There's something related here that we need to talk about. This is an impressive operation. Israel's just books are going to be written about this. Movies are going to be made about this. It was impressive. But there are two things I want to note. One is this is the most precisely targeted operation against an enemy in war ever. And there are still anti-Semites screaming how awful this was, how terrible this was, how dastardly Israel was, that this is a war crime. These people just hate Jews. There is no civilian fallout from this. The explosions were small and contained to the Hezbollah terrorists. Yes, some children of these terrorists did get injured, but very few. Had Israel launched precision-guided missiles, more innocent civilians would have died. This was extremely precision-targeted, extremely contained, and the anti-Semites are still furious because it's the Jews that did it, and that's what it's about. They hate the Jews. They don't just hate Israel, they hate the Jews. And they hold them to a double standard, demanding of something that they would demand from no one else. What they do not want is for the Jews to be able to defend themselves. They wish the Jews dead, and they're upset that instead the terrorists who want to kill the Jews are the ones who died. The other thing that must be said is China. We should be looking at this. Look what Israel was able to do by compromising pagers and walkie-talkies from Hezbollah. China makes a lot of chips that are in American products related to our infrastructure. In fact, at the gathering back in August, I had two guys on stage with me who were talking about the ports in this country. Many of them use shipping cranes that we have discovered actually transmit data that they pull from the ships by wireless electronic means and transmit it to China. They also observe and capture data of what's going in and out of our ports. A lot of the shipping containers that are out there now have NFC chips. It's like Apple Pay, wireless remote identifiers. So as the cargo is unloaded, the NFC chip relays information as to what's in the cargo, and these cranes are relaying that information back to China already. This is happening. In fact, Joe Biden has signed an executive order demanding that every single one of these cranes be replaced by the end of the year. The only port in the United States that was not affected is the port of Savannah in Georgia, because it had upgraded its cranes some time ago and chose not to use this Chinese company for its cranes. Every other port in the United States compromised, and they're having to replace the cranes. This is the sort of stuff China's doing. Think about the routers. Think about the computer hardware. Think about the manufacturing processes for so many electronic devices. We don't have to worry about terrorists doing this sort of thing in the United States, but we have to worry about China. This is another indication that our infrastructure in this country is probably not secure, and the governors of the several states would be wise to order infrastructure stress tests in every state in the union to make sure that we're not going to be compromised by Chinese technology doing something like what just happened in Lebanon. It's a huge issue. We can learn from this, from what our ally did to the bad guys, and note that the bad guys would want to do this for us. We got to take this stuff seriously. The bad guys, they mean us harm. And in meaning us harm, they've compromised our infrastructure, and we've let them do it. And now we have time, but the clock is running down. The clock is running out. We've got time to unwind China from our infrastructure, and we better act really fast on this, because we're seeing what can happen when your entire communications array is so comprehensively sabotaged. Israel months ago let it be known they had access to the cell phone network of Hezbollah, so they switched to pagers and walkie-talkies. Israel compromised the pagers and walkie-talkies, and today everything went boom. They have neutered, literally, Hezbollah terrorists. Good for Israel. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program. Y'all, I have to say, the memes about Hezbollah are some of the funniest I've seen in a long time. I'm in a great group chat with some friends. Some of them I can't recount. But feeling a vibration in their pants. This is the Venn diagram. Hezbollah seeing a goat and a Hezbollah pager. Another one. It's another Venn diagram. You know the Venn diagram where the overlapping circles? In the middle is my pager. And on one side is my pager blowing up, and on one side is your mom, and on the other side is Israel. Perhaps my favorite is Hezbollah this morning is a picture of an Almond Joy bar, And Hezbollah this afternoon, a picture of a Mounds bar. Almond Joy got nuts, Mounds don't. Oh, and then there's the other one. This is the other Venn diagram. Having, well, I can't really say that one on the radio. I'll just say, let's say, lacking testicular fortitude is the center of the Venn diagram. On one side, Hezbollah. On the other side is white dudes for Kamala Harris. These are well done. These are all well done. Yes, having sister. Also, I love the ones with the pager, and the message on the pager is 72 virgins. Marked safe from the Jews, castrating me today. This is just well done. The memification of Hezbollah. But you know, there are people upset about it. They're worried about the ethics of it. The ethics of it. They didn't separate between the political wing of Hezbollah and the military wing of Hezbollah. They're a terrorist organization. They can go boom. Essentially, Israel is held to a standard no other nation on planet Earth is held to when it comes to defending themselves and fighting the bad guys. They just did one of the most brilliant, strategic, precisely targeted attacks ever to happen in the history of planet Earth. And the anti-Semites are furious about it because the Jews pulled off something and got the bad guys. Now, I want to recommend to you Americans for Prosperity. Around the country, AFP has chapters. And with those chapters, Americans for Prosperity teaches you how to be a grassroots operative and a conservative organizer. They're the largest leading grassroots coalition in the country. Americans for Prosperity can teach you how to knock on your neighbor's door and make a persuasive case for common sense conservative reform. They can teach you how to go to your local government or your state government and engage on the big issues of the day and educate them on common sense conservative solutions for schools and families and small businesses and deregulation. All you have to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. They've got chapters in just about every single state. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Go check them out with Americans for Prosperity. Become engaged with Americans for Prosperity. Learn to be an effective conservative advocate for common sense conservative reform. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Go sign up with them today. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, had we not had the latest bombings from and the blow-ups of the pagers and stuff, I might have started here today. But, with all the news out of Israel, and I wanted to now more thoroughly explain to you how they were able to pull it off, I started there. And I didn't even get into this yesterday because it was so fast-paced. There was so much breaking news. But it's probably time, in light of everything else that's happened, that have a little bit of this discussion here, because I actually am concerned about it. 162 years ago tonight, 22,727 Americans would be wounded, dead, or missing on the battlefield at Antietam, the bloodiest day in American history. More Americans died on this day 162 years ago than at any other time in history and any other war in history. The Battle of Antietam started the 75 years to the day after the Constitution was signed. Yesterday was Constitution Day. The Battle of Antietam started that afternoon and played out through sunset tonight. It was the Union's best chance to stop Robert E. Lee, and McClellan was not a great general, and he failed, ultimately leading Abraham Lincoln to write his very famous letter to General McClellan, "If you're not using the army, could I borrow it?" 162 years after the Battle of Antietam, we are a few days removed from the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And Democrats and Comcast's own MSNBC have gone from, we need to temper our rhetoric, this is crazy, to, well, his skirt was so short, he deserved it. Our foreign adversaries have given up trying to put us on the ash heap of history, and they are instead hoping to manufacture the circumstances by which we engage in fratricide and destroy ourselves, since they can't do it. And there are Americans on the left and the right willing to oblige. Yesterday, I played a clip from CNN and my friend Anna Navarro, and I pointed out that I disagree with her, but I consider her a friend. And I got multiple emails from people, one of whom said, I could never be trusted again because I am friends with someone like that. Literally, that was what the email said. I could never be trusted again because I am friends with someone like that. I guess I could lie and say I'm not friends, because you would be amazed at the number of people on the left and the right in the media who actually do get along fabulously together, are great friends, but pretend not to be and never mention it. I try not to keep things from y'all. A lot of the people that you listen to and think are like the truth tellers du jour, they're friends with people on the left and the far left, have great times with them, but they don't tell you, so you think, oh, they're one of us, and they clearly would never have a friend on the left. I try to be as transparent with you guys as possible about my entire life. I try not to keep things from you unless there's an absolute reason. For example, my wife said, don't say anything on the radio about this or whatnot. Otherwise, I live very transparently with you. What is striking to me, though, are the number of people who are very insistent on the left and the right, by the way, because it's also on the left, that you cannot be friends with someone if you disagree with them on politics. I actually think those are the times you should be friends with people. Now, you're not going to be friends with everyone. There are lots of people who do not like me, including some listening right now. There are people that I frankly do not care for, do not like, and do not want to be in a room with. But politics is not really the dividing line for me, nor should it be for you. And what our enemies abroad want is for it to be a dividing line, because as politics has taken over greater and greater spheres in our life, and politics has become a religion for many on the left and the right, your political views and engagement actually are deciding and shaping your friendship. What you're doing is you are disengaged more and more from your actual community. You've built a community online that's just like you, echoes you, parrots you, mimics you, thinks just like you. And you know less and less, fewer and fewer people on the other side who have a different worldview than you. There are actually people on the left and the right who hate this country. You can get a sense of it, frankly, I think, by watching some of the Tucker Carlson interviews where he does propaganda for Russia and has on people who want to revise world history to make the Nazis the good guys and Winston Churchill the bad guy. There are people on the left and the right who wish to undermine the legitimacy of this country. I know people on the right, and I'm going to start with people on the right because I think y'all don't realize this is a thing, even though it is. There are people on the right who believe that this country is vile, corrupt, and sinful and needs to burn. And they wish to undermine the politics of this country because they do hope that there will be some sort of great upheaval in this country, and they are convinced that by God's help, they will be in the right and they will be on the top when that upheaval comes, and they can impose a Christian nationalism on this country where all the pagans get punished and all the people who are right with God get to rule the country. I know people who have embraced that philosophy, who are ready for this country to come undone so it can be remade in their image. And I know people on the left who hate this country. They think it is systemically racist. They think it is vile. They think that this country needs to burn and the world would be better off without them. And I got to tell you, I'm not friends with anyone, to my knowledge, on either side where you hear that. But it's problematic for me. It's deeply problematic for me that there are people with those worldviews. But there are also people that I know who really passionately like the Democrats and hate the Republicans and think the Republicans are out of their minds. And I can be friends with people who believe those things because they love the country and they just actually think Democratic ideas are better for the country. I vehemently disagree with them, but I'm friends with them. And I think you should be too. You should find a way to be friends with people who disagree with you, and then you might be able to persuade them. Now, these people, I don't actually engage in politics with them. We don't talk about politics. Anna Navarro, it's a great example. Somebody yesterday said, well, you know, she's a communist. I said, if you knew anything about who she's married to, you couldn't actually say she's a communist. You have the luxury of not actually knowing her to be able to say that. You believe it based on what she says in TV, your impressions of what she says and who she hangs out with. But if you knew her story, knew her background, knew who she's married to, you would realize she's no friend of communists. Now, I'm not here to persuade you, and I'm not going to entertain your arguments to me, but what about this in email and whatnot? I'm just here to tell you, I know this person and you don't, and your impression of this person comes from television. I know a more complicated, nuanced person. The fact that anyone would email me and say I can't be authentically conservative by having someone like that in my circle of friends actually is a damning indictment on you and your character when my God, the God of all creation, tells me to love my neighbor, and he himself hung out with people that the religious leaders of the day said were detestable people. How dare you hang out with them? I'm not Jesus Christ, but I try to model my life as best I can after him, continuously failing, but trying. The fact that we are at this point, however, in this country, where people can decide this person can't be trusted because they're friends with this person I don't like, is actually exactly where our enemies wish us to be. And to my friends on the left, I don't think you realize you're playing into their hands. I want to play you a couple of pieces. This is from Elliott Williams. He's on CNN talking about the rhetoric.
On this network, plenty of times Donald Trump needs to rein in his rhetoric. But I think we have to back off. Democrats have to back off the whole consequences and just let everybody know, look, hey, guess what happens? We'll have lower tax rates if he wins. We disagree with that. Let's run the campaign on that.
But what I'm struck by on the defense of this, or I guess on the attack on Democrats on this threat to democracy stuff, is that, for instance, Trump has not committed to accepting the results of the election, right? That sounds to me like a threat to democracy, and I don't think it's that unfair to question someone's commitment to democracy if they're saying that they can't commit to the results of election.
Okay, here's the problem with Elliott Williams saying that. Stacey Abrams, to this day, insists she won 2018, and Elliott Williams will not call Stacey Abrams a threat to democracy. Many Democrats to this day believe that George Bush stole the 2000 election, and no Democrat is shunned by the media or fellow Democrats for saying that. Hillary Clinton has multiple times said that Donald Trump stole the election in 2016 from her. And she's not a pariah on the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton has also said, as did Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, that Stacey Abrams had it stolen from her in 2016. And yet they're in leadership positions in the Democratic Party. So if you're going to say Donald Trump's a threat to democracy because he's not willing to accept the results of the election, you've got to do that about your own side to be consistent, except you're not. So you actually are making a partisan point. You are dividing based on that because you're not treating your side equally. It continues to be one of the issues. Like, for example, here again, this is the co-chair for the Kamala Harris campaign on CNN.
Well, I think that he has been the most inflammatory person, and in fact, Democratic rhetoric has not escalated in any way in recent months, hasn't escalated in any way. He has always been a threat to democracy. We've always said that. After all, this is the man who incited the riots on January 6th, who continued to cozy up to white supremacists and other racist hate groups. He is being very hypocritical, and he's trying to really turn the page away from his terrible performance at the debate and all of the things that are coming out now with his failures on IVF, his failures when it comes to coming up with any type of a plan.
Now, first of all, so she lies about the IVF. She ties him to the white supremacists. They're doubling down on this. B-word got what he deserved. That's what's happening. The Democrats have gone from we need to have a talk about rhetoric to he got what he deserved. And look at his rhetoric. How dare you call us out on your rhetoric? So what the Democrats have decided to do now is the Democrats have decided that they're going to allow Donald Trump to set their standards of behavior. You got that? When they say, well, look at all these terrible things, Donald Trump, how dare you call me out on my concerns? Look at all the terrible things Donald Trump has done. They're allowing Donald Trump now, they're excusing their behavior by saying, well, look at what Donald Trump has done. In other words, they can't be held accountable for themselves because of Donald Trump. If he gets to say these outlandish things that we don't like, well, then we get to say these outlandish things he doesn't like. Both sides are beginning to do this. They're allowing the other side to define them. We are being catechized by what we surround ourselves with. We're surrounding ourselves with the political rhetoric of both sides, and everyone is becoming more and more guilty of twisting politics into every aspect of their lives. It's exactly what the enemies of this country want us to do. The enemies of this country want us to turn on each other, and they're hoping to spark another civil war. 162 days after the bloodiest day in American history, Americans are at each other's throats. And do you know really why it is? Because we've traded a real religion for a false one. We've traded God for government. And we've decided we will make gods of ourselves. We shall be as gods. And we will use government to implement divine power, punishing the heretics and rewarding the true believers on both sides. The only way to fix the problems we have right now is to gut the government. And too many people on both sides have decided they want to wield the power of government as a cudgel against their enemies. And that continues to have us play into the hands of our enemies. 75 years to the day after our founders sat in Philadelphia and signed the Constitution, this country began spilling blood at Antietam because of the original sin of this country. And that sin was washed away with blood on a battlefield. That today, the day after that fight began, saw 27,272 Americans dead, wounded, or missing. And 162 years to the day, we're getting ready to turn on each other again because we simply cannot let it go. We cannot forgive, and we are allowing the other side to set the parameters of our own behavior when deep down I think we all know that we are behaving on both sides far too outlandishly. We're just unwilling to stop unless the other side stops first, and no one is ever going to stop themselves without the other side stopping first, which means neither side is ever going to stop. It's just going to keep getting worse. Unless we remember to love our neighbor. I have to make a point that's going to make some of you mad. So if you'll recall, J.D. Vance mentioned that a constituent of his in Springfield, Ohio, said she believed her cat, it was one of the cats that was taken and eaten by the Haitians. So a Wall Street Journal reporter showed up at the lady's home to ask her about the Haitians eating her cat. It turns out the cat had run away, but had returned. And the cat was with her when the reporter was there, and the woman said she was very sorry. She just believed the Haitians had taken her cat and eaten it, but it hadn't. Thus far, we have seen a video of some guys from Africa in Dayton, Ohio, barbecuing cat. We have seen a crazy American woman in Canton, Ohio, killing a cat and eating it. We have seen no evidence whatsoever of anyone in Springfield, Ohio, having their pets stolen and eaten by the Haitians. And so people keep trying to move the goalposts just like the left does and say, well, what about this? What about this? Well, we have a video of someone saying they've heard about it happening, but no one's actually produced evidence in Springfield, Ohio, that this is actually happening. Of all the things the GOP could be closing their campaign on, we've chosen a lie about stolen cats instead of the truth about an overwhelmed system. Crazy. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. should you wish to be on the program. I want to talk to you about an email I got from Pat. And Pat has an AOL address, so she is a woman of a particular age. But this goes to my last monologue on, maybe we should try to have friends with whom we disagree politically if we're supposed to love our neighbor. Friends with whom we disagree politically. And maybe we should stop judging other people for having friends who do not see eye to eye. It makes us better people. And so Pat decided she needed to email me. I don't have any child molester friends. We disagree on the MAP philosophy. By the same token, if you push abortion on demand, cutting off body parts of children for the trans agenda, or allowing anyone in this country with no supervision or vetting, you're ruining the greatest country on earth. We can't be friends. It's more than a disagreement, but you do you. Sincerely, Pat. Now, I suspect there are some of you who agree with Pat, but just think about this. We will leave the child molesters out of here. I wasn't talking about felons. I was talking about people who have political disagreement. That she decided to go there actually says a lot about Pat and her character, and none of it good. And also her lack of basic comprehension of points. But to Pat's larger point, if you believe in these things, we can't be friends. And maybe Pat's still listening. She wanted to try to make a point to me. She missed my point entirely to make a different point. But I wonder, and y'all feel free to email me and let me know. When you've decided I can't be friends with any of these people who disagree with me on any of these things, who believe these things that I find antithetical to this country, how do you persuade them they're wrong? How do you persuade them that they're wrong? Because, in my mind, if I think that someone is risking their salvation, in my mind, it is less productive for me to stand on outside their house with a bullhorn yelling, "Repent or burn in hell. Repent or burn in hell." It's less productive to do that than to maybe get to know them, build a relationship with them, explain to them why I think it's wrong, and maybe they come to know my heart, and maybe they change their mind. Maybe they change their mind. Now, I say this from personal experience because I have a friend who was a committed, diehard atheist. God is dead. And actually, we went to dinner because he despised me and my religious views, and actually thought it would be funny to go to dinner with me. And we wound up having a conversation, wound up striking up a friendship. And this dude goes to church now. And I'm not going to say I had anything to do with it. I know the way the Lord works, but he would have never actually changed his mind had I not been willing to have a friendly engagement with him. And then when I didn't know the answers, point him to other people and surrounded him with people. So if you feel like you need to send me an email and express that in your mind you're more morally superior than me because you have entire categories of people who you refuse to be friends with, that's fine. I tend to take the what would Jesus do view, which is Jesus had entire categories of people who he himself was personally going to send to hell. And he decided, you know what, while I'm walking the planet, I'll hang out with them and see if maybe I can change their hearts and get them to heaven instead. But you, Pat, as you said, you do you. And I'll do me. The fact that you felt the need to email me to make sure that I knew that there are these entire classes of people you refuse to be friends with, I think actually says a lot not good about you, but you yourself, I'm sure, look in the mirror very proudly every single day, just like the Planned Parenthood activists do, looking smugly, proudly at themselves for their intolerance. I personally think that I'm not going to change someone's heart or mind. And instead, what we're going to be doing is every 4 years convincing ourselves that the world is coming to an end unless our side wins, because we've decided to give up persuasion and instead just beat each other to a bloody pulp. So good work advancing us towards the Civil War there, Pat. Good job. Now, we got to move on to ProPublica and Amber Thurman. You are probably aware of the story, maybe you're not, of Amber Thurman. This is a story driven by ProPublica, and there are a whole lot of angles on this story that we need to understand. At least 2 women in Georgia died after they couldn't access legal abortions and timely medical care in their state, ProPublica has found. And so ProPublica does this story about Amber Thurman. And Amber Nicole Thurman suffered from sepsis in a suburban Atlanta hospital. She had taken an abortion pill and encountered a rare complication. She had not expelled all the fetal tissue. She showed up at a hospital in Georgia for a routine D&C procedure. But her state had made performing the procedure a felony, says ProPublica. Any doctor who violated the new Georgia law could be prosecuted. Thurman waited in pain in a hospital bed, worried about what would happen to her 6-year-old. It took 20 hours for doctors to operate. By then it was too late, and she died. That is what they claim. They would feel the need to wait for a higher blood pressure, wait for a higher fever. Really got to justify this one. Bleed a little more, says Dr. Melissa Kotke, an OBGYN at Emory, warning lawmakers during the hearing. Doctors and a nurse involved in Thurman's care declined to explain their thinking and did not respond to questions from ProPublica. So what you should know is that ProPublica, without any information from the doctors, decided to run a story and extrapolate from it that this woman died because of Georgia's abortion law. Thurman wanted a surgical abortion close to home and held out hope as advocates tried to get the ban paused in court. But as her pregnancy progressed to its 9th week, she couldn't wait any longer. She scheduled a D&C in North Carolina, where abortion at that stage was still legal. And on August 13th, woke up at 4 a.m. to make the journey with her best friend. On their drive, they hit standstill traffic. The clinic couldn't hold Thurman's spot longer than 15 minutes. It was inundated with women. Instead, a clinic employee offered Thurman a 2-pill abortion regime approved by the FDA. Her pregnancy was within the standard of care for the treatment. Getting to the clinic had required scheduling a day off work, finding a babysitter, making an excuse at the clinic. She sat through a counseling session in which she was told how to safely take the pills and instructed to go to the emergency room if complications developed. She signed a release saying she understood. She took the first pill there and insisted on driving home before the symptoms started. She took the second pill the next day. She had complications. And she died. And what ProPublica, which is a left-wing organization, has done is it has decided to blame Georgia's fetal heartbeat ban. And the Kamala Harris administration is now advancing the story, targeting people in Georgia, claiming that it is because of this law. Here's the actual truth of the matter. And thankfully, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in Georgia has actually allowed a actual doctor to write an op-ed on this case and explain the actual law in Georgia. Christina Francis is the doctor. So you have ProPublica, not doctors, who did not talk to Amber Thurman's doctors, writing a story extrapolating based on anecdote and agenda that Georgia's fetal heartbeat law cost this woman her life. Here is Dr. Francis, an actual doctor. The 28-year-old medical assistant obtained abortion drugs from an abortion clinic in North Carolina, where induced abortion is legal at 9 weeks gestation. Thurman took the first drug, mifepristone, at the clinic. Staff instructed her to take the second drug, misoprostol, at home and visited an emergency room if she had complications. After experiencing increasingly concerning symptoms over the next several days, heavy bleeding, vomiting blood, and fainting, she was transported by ambulance to the hospital. Despite being found to have retained tissue in her uterus, a common complication of this kind of an abortion, and starting antibiotics for sepsis, her condition worsened to the point of requiring open abdominal surgery. Tragically, she died. The reason Georgia's abortion law isn't responsible for Thurman's death is simple. It explicitly allows physicians to intervene in cases of medical emergencies or if the fetus has no detectable heartbeat, both of which applied in Thurman's case. Any assertion she experienced a delay in care as a secondary effect of the law is speculation. One thing is clear. She died from a legal chemical abortion, which abortion advocates have argued is safer than Tylenol. And that's the point here. ProPublica doesn't want to talk about the claim that the abortion pill is as safe as Tylenol because actually, as this doctor notes, an actual doctor, at 9 weeks, it is very often the case that with these supposedly safer than Tylenol abortion drugs, parts of the child do not exit during the abortion, and you have to have a D&C. It is just as easy to speculate that this woman let her condition go on for so long and she was so weakened she couldn't survive the surgery, as opposed to say the doctors waited for so long because of Georgia's abortion law. In fact, Georgia's abortion law is very clear. It is very clear. You yourself can read the law and see it for yourself that if the fetus has no heartbeat or it's a medical emergency, the doctors can intervene. The fetus clearly did not have a heartbeat in this case because it was only a part of one. Most of it had actually been flushed away. And also it was a medical emergency. Perhaps we might be able to conclude as well that it took her multiple days before she decided to go to the emergency room. And by the time she was there, her condition was so weak, perhaps the doctors weren't sure she could survive the surgery. But at the end, it became clear it was the only way. And she didn't survive the surgery. Instead, ProPublica and the Democrats decided to do this hit job on Georgia because they're trying to help Kamala Harris. There's a moral of a story here you've got to clearly understand here and take away. Number one, the moral of the story is how clearly coordinated ProPublica is with the Democrats. They've done the hit jobs on the Supreme Court. They've run this hit job. They didn't even talk to this woman's doctors or the hospital. They just ran the story as speculation. And Kamala Harris's team seized it, is running ads on it, as are the Democrats in the state of Georgia, treating it as fact. The level of coordination between the media and the Democrats is overwhelmingly clear in this case. The other thing that should be overwhelmingly clear to every single one of you is that Republicans, therefore, have to be on their A game. This is something the GOP has been missing for a while, which is something that I got to point out at a sheer frustration over and over and over again. The Republican Party used to be on its A game because it's not like this is new. The media and the Democrats have been out to get us all the time. Even before Ronald Reagan, go back to Nixon, the Democrats and the media have worked in conjunction to get us. But Republicans used to be very sharp. Go back to the argument between George H.W. Bush and Dan Rather live on television when I was a little boy. I remember that argument live on television. George H.W. Bush savaging Dan Rather did damage to CBS News' reputation. It helped George H.W. Bush. Look at how J.D. Vance handles the media on a regular basis when he's confronted by them with their questions. Republicans have to be on their A game. But back to J.D. Vance. What has J.D. Vance done in the last couple of weeks? He's helped seed a narrative about stolen pets in Springfield, Ohio, for which there still exists no actual evidence that it happened. And the media has been able to dismiss the GOP as fringe conspiracy theorists over that, as opposed to J.D. Vance and Donald Trump making a big deal about the overwhelmed social services in Springfield, Ohio, which is easily proven and everyone agrees with. We've got to be on our A game. Catering to the fringe right on social media is how we lose this election. And time again these days, Republicans are catering to the fringe mob on social media instead of to everyone else. Here are the Democrats working with a left-wing media institution to coordinate a story to persuade women in Georgia that they need to vote for the Democrats. The story is not true. The story is easily debunked. Kudos to the local newspaper in Atlanta for allowing a physician to debunk the story. But it's another example of why we must stop presuming ourselves to be victims and be on our A game at all times. And too many Republicans have decided they'd rather be hysterical. I want to welcome those of you listening on KFBK in Sacramento. Normally I'm on and will be on KSTE in the evenings out there. But if you're tuning in on KFBK, wondering where Tom Sullivan is, he's out today. And so they're running me instead. Thanks to them for doing that. But Tom will be back. At the top of the hour, as a programming note, for those of you listening live, it is 1:27 p.m. Eastern time right now. The Federal Reserve will make its announcement on interest rates. I will cover that as it comes out. I am keeping my eye on the story. As soon as we know what they're going to do, the smart play is probably a 1/4 point drop. Some people hope it'll be a 0.5 percentage point drop. They tend to be super cautious with these things, and inflation is still higher than 2%. So the odds are it's going to be a 0.5 point drop, or a 1/4 point, not a 0.5 point, but we will find out. If it's a 0.5 point, markets are probably going to skyrocket. If it's a 1/4 point, it's already baked in, but we will find out when the time comes. The phone number here is 877-973-7425. Those of you on hold, be patient with me. I will get to you when we get to the other side of the break. I've been running my mouth and going long, and so this segment is short, and I will acknowledge it before I get an angry email from my producer telling me to stop being so long-winded in the first second, Charlie. I know it's coming. It's my fault. I've gotten worked up on these stories. When we come back, Kamala Harris's plan for the economy is to tell you she and Tim Walz are part of the middle class. She had this session with the National Association of Black Journalists, and it was full of nonsense, no substance, and they gave her a complete pass on it. I'll get to it. Right now, though, as we're awaiting whether or not the Federal Reserve is going to cut interest rates and by how much, you got a lot of banks out there in turmoil, particularly community banks are struggling right now. Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years. And they've been warning people about a secret war on cash. If you're safeguarding your hard-earned cash, you need to be able to protect it from the secret war, and Swiss America can educate you. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. Their report takes less than 15 minutes to read. I myself have gotten a copy of it. I have read it. It's easy to understand. I had no idea the government was tracking your paper money purchases the way they are. And by the way, it includes digital forms of currency as well. You get this report completely for free by calling or texting my name, Erick, to 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. The Secret War on Cash is available to you completely for free from Swiss America. All you do is call or text my name, Erick, to 800-289-2646, or go to SwissAmerica.com/Erick, E-R-I-C-K, today. Message and data rates may apply. Part of this is politics has become a religion for so many people. And there are so many people who believe I can't be friends with the heretics or the sinners. And politics is the most pernicious religion because there's no grace in it. There's no mercy. There's no forgiveness. And it pains me to hear that you are going through this, particularly with the youngest child. And there's a baby involved who doesn't have a relationship with a grandmother. I'm sorry for you. I really am. I will tell you, I am a firm believer. I don't know what your persuasion or background is, but I will tell you, I am a firm believer in prayer, and that I really do believe it works and can heal these things. And it takes time sometimes. Yeah, and that's just it. It's so sad, but you know what? I will tell you this, and I'm a firm believer in this direction. I'll let you go here with this, Liz, and thank you for being patient with me on the phones. It doesn't matter whether she believes in God or not, because he believes in her. She is made in his image and likeness. And so all you can do is pray about it and let God work his will, and his will be done. All things work for the good of those called according to his purpose, even when we can't understand it or see it or wish it were some other way. So hang in there. Sometimes a series of events will happen that calls people back to their roots, and I would certainly hope that other listeners might be hearing this and pray as well. But y'all, it is religion such a poison. I mean, just I'm thinking about that email I got from the lady Pat, that I'm just not going to have friends with all of these people who do all of these things that I vehemently disagree with because they're destroying the country. I'm going to tell you again, and it's one of the most awkward sermon. You know, so when I went to seminary, it was because I was being invited to preach at these churches, and I'd never been to seminary and decided I should go to seminary. And by the way, I've decided I got to go start classes back next year. Oh, Charlie and Philip, by the way, I've been meaning to tell you, I intend to start taking classes again. It's good for my soul and my brain to be able to do that. And so I want to just a class. I got to go finish up at Reformed Theological, working on my master's. I started though because I started getting these invites, and then when they found out where I was going, all these little independent Free Will Baptist churches were like, nah, I don't think so. But I did one time get to preach on that verse in the Bible about love your neighbor. And, you know, you read the original Greek, you do it all. You want some caveat, you want some carve out, you want some, I don't like this person. There are always going to be people you don't like who you can't stand to be around. That is the nature of the fallen world. But also, you got to love your neighbor, and there are no carve outs for that. And I tell you, and as I have said before, as I wrote in my new book, You Shall Be As Gods, I actually have the line in there that you should love your neighbor in such a way that your transgender, gay rights supporting, atheist, progressive neighbor leaves a house key with you when they go on vacation, because they know you're going to be the person who makes sure nothing happens to their home while they're gone. And I mean that very seriously. I picked the most provocative view of that world I know the demographics of my audience, but I'm actually, it's provocative, but it's true. You gotta be able to be neighborly enough that the people who you would otherwise in political life absolutely despise, and they despise you, understand that when they're out of town, you're going to make sure that their property is okay. They can leave a key with you. And you're not going to go rifling through their things and planting Bibles and leaving little prayers on the wall and telling them to repent. You're just going to actually be their neighbor and take care of their stuff. Because we live in a world where that is more and more uncommon. I will freely admit I am the guy in my neighborhood who has the key to almost all of my neighbors around me. So if they're out of town, they know I'll go over and either make sure the cat has food, or if an alarm goes off, go over and check it out. And I'm totally fine with that. I think that's what it means to be neighborly, to be able to know your neighbors, actually your physical, real neighbors, not the ones on Facebook. Because you know what's going to happen. At some point, something's going to happen to you, and your Facebook friend is not going to come check on you because they live on the other side of the world. But your actual physical next door neighbor just might if something's wrong. And all of us, so I'll tell you the random story. You know, my wife's health situation, she had to have surgery. This has now been several years ago. And she was horrified. She won't mind me telling you the story. She's like, yeah, we want meals. Put us on the prayer list at church and bring us food. And she's like, what are you doing? She's like, we don't need to do that. You can cook for yourself and the kids aren't going to eat it. It's like, I got to work full time. I got to take the kids to school. I got to bring these kids home. I'm going to be hungry. So I need somebody to help me. She's like, I can't believe we're asking people for help. My wife and I can talk a good game, but I'll be honest with you, I hate asking people for help. I despise asking people for help. My wife is worse than me. We love to help other people. We literally are the family that when someone moves in on our block, we bake them something, take them and introduce it. And if you need anything, let us know. But God forbid we should ask anybody for help. Like, okay, so, you know, if you're outside of Atlanta, I've been doing ads for my friend Jim Hardman up in Gainesville, Georgia. Jim owns a GMC dealership, and I got so exasperated a couple of years ago because something happened to my car, took it to the local dealer. This is on Easter, last Easter. It was died in the parking lot at Publix the day before Easter, could not restart it to save my life. Had it towed the day after Easter to the local car dealer. And for 2 weeks, it sat on the dealer lot. They could not do anything with it. And then they're like, did you know your car won't start? We're going to have to tow it into the shop. It's like, yes, that's why I towed it there in the first place. I was so exasperated. I talked about it on radio. So Mr. Hardman Jim calls and tells my call screeners, like, listen, I need him to call me because I've gone to pick up his car. He owns the GMC dealership. It's 2 hours north of me, by the way. And I'm like, what on earth is this? So I call him, and I was like, Mr. Hardman, this is completely unnecessary. Y'all, I hate to ask people for help. Part of it is just being introverted. I don't want to have to talk to people to begin with, let alone ask them for help. And I was like, this is totally unnecessary. You do not have to do this. And he says, son, I'm telling you, the tow truck is on its way there. All I need you to do is call him and tell him it's there. This is not your problem anymore. And that's just the sort of guy he is. So I'm actually my brakes have started squeaking, and I was painful to text you the other day and say, hey, I need to bring my car up to your shop to get it worked on. Would it be possible to get a loaner? He's like, I'll have somebody drive down and swap cars with you tomorrow. Just such a good guy, but oh my gosh, asking people for help. It is, I'm always happy to give people help. I just hate to ask people for help because I don't want to bother people. Hate to bother people. This is completely off the beaten path, I realize, but back to Liz's point is prayer works, and you got to keep loving people even if they hate you. You got just, the whole turn the other cheek thing. It's whether, I don't care what your religious persuasion is, it's actually good advice. Just be the nice person. It doesn't mean to be taken advantage of. It doesn't mean to have people walk all over you. It just means be a nice person. And it's amazing what that can do to improve other people's lives. Now, I have gone completely off the beaten path here, but I still got to make this point back onto the news of the day. I need to play you this audio from Kamala Harris. She yesterday spoke to the National Association of Black Journalists. Remember, Donald Trump actually went to their event, and they did not give him a great reception. Of course, there was fawning praise for Kamala Harris, who lied to their faces, and they did nothing to it. They were perfectly happy being lied to by Kamala Harris.
Years ago, when we came in during the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
That has been fact-checked by factcheck.com, a garbage progressive publication, as not being true. When a garbage fact-check operation like factcheck.com says that that's not true, it's probably not true. And yet she did it, and they didn't call her out on it. But never fear, my friends, never fear. Kamala Harris actually has an economic plan for this country. This is Kamala Harris announcing her economic plan at the same event.
They can just get their foot in the door to be able to then engage in what will prove to be their opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya. She saved up, and it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home. And I know, and I identify with, I know where I come from.
That's her plan, folks. Middle class. She's in the middle class. What her actual plan is that no one should ever be allowed to be out of the middle class. So if you're rich, you're going to be brought into the middle class. If you're middle class, you're going to be made poor under Kamala Harris's plan. That is her plan. Don't worry. It has become the talking point. This is Tim Walz. This is Tim Walz on the campaign trail talking to somebody in Georgia.
Let's start with inflation. What do you tell
Frank
people
Malloy.
who wake up, frankly, each morning wondering, how am I going to get by financially?
Yeah, I tell them, Kamala Harris and I know something about it, being middle-class folks. Our families sit at the table trying to pay the bill.
That's Frank Malloy. Frank Malloy, literally, he's like 5 blocks from me. That was when Tim Walz was in my neck of the woods yesterday, here in where I am in Macon, Georgia. That's the local news anchor. So you got that, though. Tim Walz, we're middle class. We're middle class. What is your policy proposal to help Americans? Well, we're middle class. That's not a policy proposal. I know that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris speak in platitude, but platitude is not policy. It's what I had to explain to my friends at CNN after her campaign speech at the Democratic National Convention. Like, oh, it's so deep policy. No, that wasn't policy. That was platitude. Policy is, here's how we're going to improve the lives of the middle class. All Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to say is we were in the middle class. You know what they did? They went from the middle class to career grifters off the taxpayer dime. And that's what they want for you and me, to suck Uncle Sam's man boob for the rest of our lives and to be punished if we have the audacity to think we might be able to make a life for ourselves off of Uncle Sam's man boob. That is their policy position, is that all of us should have to suckle at Uncle Sam's man boob. That's it. I know you're horrified by that image in your head. You should be horrified that that is their actual policy. That is what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris want for you and me, is to have to be on a government social safety net with Uncle Sam handing us his man boob, hoping that they've given him some sort of sex change operation so he can produce the milk to sustain ourselves, because they do not want you off that social safety net. If you get off that social safety net, you will be taxed and abused by the government until you're forced back on it. And if you fall through the cracks of it, well, it's because America's a systemically racist society. It's never their fault. That's where we are as a position right now. That is Kamala Harris and Tim Walz public policy positions. They're in the middle class, and you will be too, whether you want to be or not. And also, because they're commies, they hate the middle class. Now, I must tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, because right now you can get 3 of them. You can save $200. You can get them for less than $200, and you can eliminate odors. They eliminate odors. They don't mask odors. They don't produce an odor that overwhelms the bad odor. They actually eliminate it. They generate ozone, which latches onto the ions that are the odors, and eliminate the ions that are the odors. So you can't smell the ions because the ions have been destroyed. What you do is you go to EdenPureDeals.com. You'll see a discount code box, and you put in Erick3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. It is an air purifier, so it's going to trap the dust, and it's going to trap the pollen, and it's going to trap the mildew floating in the air. And they have electrostatic plates instead of filters, so you don't have a filter subscription. You just wipe it out on occasion. But then where they shine is the odor elimination. So, young parent, you have dirty diapers in your house. It stinks. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm wipes them out. Your grandma, you moved into grandma's house and she was a lifelong smoker in the house and it stinks. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm can wipe it out. You have an Aunt Daisy and her trailer smells like cat food and dead cats. Like, true story, that was my great Aunt Daisy. Yep, the cat died under the couch. Didn't find it for years. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm will wipe out the odors. All you do, go to EdenPureDeals.com, put in the discount code Erick3, ERICK3. You'll get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms. You'll save $200, and you will get clean air in your house thanks to Eden Pure. Hello there. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. Man, I'm just seeing this picture of, it's a toilet in Lebanon where someone was clearly sitting on the toilet when the pager bomb went off and the toilet is destroyed. Like, not destroyed as in he had a bad night on the toilet. It was like literally like busted in half. That was some explosive poop. Goodness gracious. Okay. I might as well tell you the story since I was part of the Eden thing. So my great Aunt Daisy, God bless her, she was ancient of days when I was little. And she had been a nurse, and she had this old Chevy Caprice, and she was your prototypical childless cat lady. And she moved in as she was older with my grandparents. She was my grandfather's sister. They were both hard of hearing. They would yell at each other on the front porch. It was always so embarrassing. But she would leave her back windows cracked in her Chevrolet Caprice and put the cat food on the back seats so that the cats could climb into the car and get it without dogs getting the cat food. And she used the canned cat food. That's disgusting, not the dried cat food. But she had lived in a trailer about 30 minutes from where my grandparents went. And so every few days, she would get one of the grandkids to drive her down to feed the cats that still resided in the trailer. And there was a cat door they could go in and out if they needed to. Well, her cat, Sweetie, disappeared. Sweetie disappeared. Couldn't find Sweetie. Her favorite cat was gone. Well, after my Aunt Daisy, now her trailer, you should understand, obviously stunk like cats and cat just pee, and it was gross. I'm starting to gag just thinking about it. But we would take her down there. You could smell the trailer before you got to it. And after she died, the family put her trailer up for sale, and some hunters got it to put on a farm. And I mean, it had the furniture in it. Well, they moved the trailer out to their hunting preserve, and they found Sweetie in the couch. Been there quite a lot. They found the skeleton of Sweetie, I should say. Been there a very long time. And oh my gosh, that was awful. She was a cat lady. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm, though, it really would have worked even in that. All right, interest rates. Stay tuned. It's happening right now. I'll bring you the latest when we come back. Breaking news. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here. Breaking news. The Federal Reserve is surprising everybody with a 0.5-point cut. A lot of people thought it was going to be a quarter-point cut. And, I've been telling Philip, we were sitting on the front porch on Sunday, and he said, what do you think it's going to be? I said, I think it's going to be half point, half a percentage point. And he says, I'm thinking a quarter point. I said, well, I'm thinking a quarter point too, and I've been wrong every time. So that's why I'm going with half, and I've been wrong every time. And, well, half point, which I guess kind of technically makes me right. The Dow, the markets, they're all surging. The Russell 2000 up, NASDAQ up 139 points. 49 points. It just refreshed. S&P up 35 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 203 points right now. Jerome Powell deciding they will cut the interest rates by a half point. What's so interesting is that the CNBC still has its earlier stories that Fed to cut. Markets reaction based on how deep the cuts. Markets expect a quarter point cut, and yet it's now a half a point. This is from CNBC happening right now. Again, it's breaking news. The Federal Reserve has decided to cut interest rates a half a percentage point. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday enacted its first interest rate cut since the early days of the COVID pandemic, slicing half a percentage point off benchmark rates in an effort to head off a slowdown in the labor market. With both the jobs picture and inflation softening, the central bank's Federal Open Markets Committee chose to lower its key overnight borrowing rate by a half percentage point or 50 basis points, affirming market expectations that had recently shifted from an outlook for a cut half that size. Outside of the emergency rate cuts during COVID, the last time the Federal Open Markets Committee cut by a half point was in 2008 during the global financial crisis. The decision lowers the federal funds rate to a range between 4.75% and 5%. While the rate sets short-term borrowing costs for banks, it spills over into multiple consumer products such as mortgages, car loans, and credit cards. In addition to their reduction, the committee indicated through its dot plot the equivalent of 50 more basis point cuts by the end of the year, close to market pricing. The matrix of individual officials' expectations pointed to another full percent point in cuts by the end of 2025 and a half point in 2026. In all, the dot plot shows the benchmark rate coming down about 2 percentage points beyond Wednesday's move. The committee has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2% and judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance, the post-meeting statement said. The decision to ease came in light of progress on inflation and the balance of risks, according to the statement. The vote was 11-1, with Governor Michelle Bowman preferring a quarter-point move. In assessing the state of the economy, the committee judged that, quote, job gains have slowed and the unemployment rate has moved up but remains low. The officials raised their expected employment rate this year to 4.4% from the 4% projection in June and lowered their inflation outlook to 2.3% from 2.6%. On core inflation, the committee is suggesting a projection of 2.6%, which is a 0.2% reduction from June. The committee expects the long-term neutral rate to be about 2.9%, a level that has drifted higher as the Fed struggles to get inflation down to 2%. They say most economic indicators look solid. Gross domestic product has been rising steadily. The Atlanta Federal Reserve is tracking 3% growth in the third quarter based on continued strength in consumer spending. The Federal Reserve chose to cut even though most gauges indicate inflation is well ahead of the 2% target. The Fed's preferred gauge is 2.5%. Now, there are concerns about the labor market and an economic slowdown and a recession coming. Here is a couple of takeaway points from this news. And if you're just tuning in, it's really big breaking news. This affects you more than pretty much anything that's going to happen in Washington this week. The Federal Reserve cutting interest rates half a percentage point with a suggestion that by year's end, by Christmas, there will be another half a percentage point cut. So a full 1 percentage point drop in interest rates by the end of this year, bringing costs down to about 4%, which will be good for the economy. It will be a stimulus. It could provoke inflation. There are a couple things you got to understand. The Federal Reserve for a very long time was tasked with managing inflation. And the way they manage inflation is through the adjustment of interest rates. Now, what are the interest rates that they manage? They don't really manage your mortgage rate or your car loan rate. What the Federal Reserve does is it manages the supply of money in the economy. The way it manages it is through the interest it charges banks. So when a bank goes to the Federal Reserve and borrows $1 million, the Federal Reserve charges the bank its rate, which right now, let's say, is 5%. So the Fed puts a 5% interest on the loan to the bank of $1 million. The bank then loans 10 people $100,000 each. And the bank charges them prime plus. What is prime plus? Well, that's the prime rate, what the Fed rate is, 5%, plus some additional. For people with not great credit, it might be 8%. For people with really good credit, it might be 5.25%. But so now the Fed is getting 5% from the bank on the $1 million. The bank has divided up that $1 million in 10 $100,000 loans to people, and they're charging variable rates, all of which are more than 5%. That's how the bank is making its money. And the Federal Reserve, the higher it charges rates, the higher banks must charge rates, which discourages lending from people, which slows down the amount of money in the economy, which brings down inflation because inflation gets cash starved. The reason we have inflation is when interest rates are very low and the government dumps a whole lot of money into the economy. It drives up the prices of everything because people want to make some level of profit. They have some level of expectation sales, and people have more money to buy stuff. So this is my continuously dumbing down for everyone to understand analogy, and I realize there are people smarter than me yelling at me, Erickson, you're leaving out details, you're getting it wrong. This is for people who are not financial people to try to understand. Let's take $1,000 for an Xbox. You hand every American $1,000 to buy an Xbox. You know what's going to happen to the price of the Xbox? The Xbox price is probably going to go to $10,000. That's inflation. Why? Because you can only make a limited number of Xboxes. You can't make an Xbox for all 350 million Americans who now have $1,000 to buy an Xbox. So the price of the Xbox is now going to go to $10,000 to limit the availability of the Xbox because there are only so many chips, there are only so many Xboxes. That's inflation. You give everybody a bunch of money so that they can buy something. Well, the price of that thing is going to go up because there are only a fixed number of those things. There are every year a fixed number of apples that the apple trees can produce. There are a fixed number of cows that can be slaughtered. There are a fixed number of ears of corn that can be picked. And when everybody's got money to go buy it all, well, that stuff has to go up in price to restrict the amount that people can actually buy. Otherwise, there will be shortages. And in the laws of supply and demand, the market balances itself out. The more supply there is, the lower the price. The less supply there is, the higher the price. The more the demand there is, the higher the price. The lower the demand, the lower the price. It all balances out on a supply and demand curve. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it makes it more expensive to get money into the economy, so it slows down the economy and decreases inflation. When the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, it increases the amount of money in the economy and can spark inflation, and that's kind of the concern with the 0.5 percentage point increase or decrease. There is already higher inflation than what the Fed wants. The Federal Reserve has an expectation of 2% inflation, which is a good thing. A 2% inflation means wages can rise comfortably and salaries can rise. Well, wages and salaries, the cost of goods can rise. Everything can rise at about 2%. That's kind of absorbable by everyone in the economy. The problem is right now, everything's roughly 3%, 2.9% to 3%. So inflation's still higher than it should be. But in the 1980s, Congress mandated the Federal Reserve have additional responsibilities for employment. So the Fed has to balance two competing issues, inflation and employment. And when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it can kill inflation, but it can also slow down the economy, provoking a recession, which increases unemployment. It's unfair that the government did this to the Federal Reserve, but they did it nonetheless. When Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, his recommendation was always ignore unemployment and focus on interest rates. Because if interest rates can stay low and inflation can be out of the way, employment can be high. We're in a weird situation right now where we have inflation, we have interest rates high that they are, and now we've got growing unemployment. The Fed has more juggling to do than they have in the past. They're trying to thread a needle without sparking an inflation or without sparking a recession. Now, here's the problem. The odds of a recession have continued to go up. Now, here's the thing that the Federal Reserve does, which I find so intriguing. The Federal Reserve releases a statement, and the statement is the same every time with just key words changed. And you can see the Federal Reserve's thinking based on the words that they changed. So, for example, when they released the statement in July, here's how it read. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. Job gains have moderated, and the employment rate has moved up but remains low. Here's how it's changed now. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. No change in that sentence. Job gains have slowed, and the unemployment rate has moved up but remains low. So what changed was in June they said job gains have moderated, and now they say job gains have slowed. Additionally, in the next sentence, in June it read, inflation has eased over the past year but remains somewhat elevated. In recent months, there has been some further progress towards the 2% inflation objective. Here's how it reads now. Inflation has made further progress towards the committee's 2% objective, but remains somewhat elevated. They deleted the entire phrase, eased over the past year, but remains somewhat elevated. In recent months, there has been some further progress. They've also done this with the second paragraph. The committee seeks to achieve maximum employment and inflation at the rate of 2% over the long run. Now they've added a new section. The committee has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably towards 2% and judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance. In other words, they think they're maximizing employment and minimizing inflation, and so they can cut by 0.5 percentage point. Now, at the end of the year, if inflation surprises everyone and rears its head again, you're not going to not only get that 0.5 percentage point cut they're saying might come in December, you might get a rate increase again, and the markets are going to tank right around Christmas time. That's going to be fun. So the bottom line right now is the Federal Reserve is saying it has cut interest rates by 0.5 percentage point and expects that it will also cut interest rates by another 0.5 percentage point by the end of the year, and expects that by the end of 2025, we will have a full another point off interest rates, reducing interest rates by 2 percentage points over the next year and a half. That has encouraged the markets. The markets are rebounding. Right now, as I'm going to commercial break, just so you know, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 166 points. The S&P 500 is up 30 points. The NASDAQ is up 143 points. Now the Dow, as I literally was at 160, now it's up 175 points. The markets are reacting very favorably. They were very surprised. They were expecting a 0.25 point rate. Instead, they got a 0.5 percentage point cut from the Federal Reserve, which is stimulating the markets today. So your credit card interest rates and mortgage rates and auto loan rates will start to come down, which should provoke more spending in the economy, which is what they hope. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Remember, please, if you would, text ARMY, ARMY, to 33777. As we're going around the country, if you text ARMY to 33777, you're going to get a link back in your text message. If you click it, you can put in your first and last name, your zip code and email address. It asks for your phone number, but it's not required. As we're going around the country, for example, the 2 days after the election, we'll be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. we'll be able to let you know. We, in the next year, want to start rolling out our gatherings around the country. Maybe go to Sacramento, go down to Florida, love to be in Virginia, wherever we need to be around the country, and do some live events with the audience as the show has grown. We are coast to coast now and continue to pick up stations. So if you text ARMY to 33777, put in that information. As we come to your area, we'll be able to send you an email and send you the link to the RSVP site. So for those of you in Tulsa, for example, 2 days after the election, November 7th, we're going to do a live event in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It'll be the first election debriefing we do in person with the crowd. We're going to let you know where the venue is. We're working on all those details with KRMG right now. And so if you text ARMY to 33777, put in your info. When we get out there, we'll be able to send you the note, give you the RSVP link, so you'll have advance notice. Now, we got other stuff to talk about. If you're just tuning in, it is breaking news. The Federal Reserve has cut interest rates by 50 basis points. That is 0.5%. Now, how does that help you? Well, as the Fed cuts interest rates to banks, banks lower their mortgage rates and loan rates, and credit cards lower their rates, so your costs begin to come down. Not nearly as low as they were a while back. My car loan rate is, 0.75% for my car loan. Unbelievable. I'm almost done paying it off. These rates come down and they help you. Speaking of rates, you can get auto loans and mortgages and things like that from Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank is my bank. I just recommended a gun store use Old Glory Bank because they're having a hard time with their bank. And Old Glory was founded by conservatives for conservatives. John Rich, Larry Elder, Ben Carson, people like that. They started the bank. They didn't start it from scratch. They bought a bank in Oklahoma, and they've expanded it nationwide. So they got underlying fundamentals that are solid and great banking, a great app, great debit card, great app on the phone, great website. You can get no fee checking, no fee savings. That's what I've got. You can do direct deposit. They've got all sorts of benefits if you're a first responder. What you do is you go to oldglorybank.com, fill out the form, takes less than 8 minutes online, oldglorybank.com. Fill out the form, you get your account going, no fee checking or no fee savings, and you go from there with them. You can get loans, you can develop relationships with them, get car loans, you can get mortgages, whatever you need. Old Glory Bank wants to take care of you. They really are good. They really are my bank. And you're not going to get canceled. If you're a gun owner, if you're a gun manufacturer, a gun store, you need a bank to do business with, Old Glory Bank. That's why they're there. oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. It's oldglorybank.com. Hello there. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425 if you want to be on the program. I want to play you some audio. This is an exchange, and I don't have the video of it. I've just got the exchange. This is Caitlin Collins on CNN with Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And Tom Cotton continues to be one of the very best Republicans on television doing combat with reporters. Just listen to this exchange.
Senate Republicans today blocked a bill that would guarantee access to the very thing that a lot of them say they support. It's also the very thing that we have heard from Donald Trump say that he supports. Democrats tried and failed again to pass that measure, which would guarantee access to IVF nationwide. And tonight they are using this vote to hammer Republicans who said no. My source tonight on this is Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator, great to have you here because you and your fellow Senate Republicans mostly voted against this, arguing that it's a show vote. But Donald Trump, as you know, recently pledged to either have insurance companies or the government pay for fertility treatments. So would you have voted for a bill like this if he was in office?
Well, Caitlin, first off, I have to correct almost everything you said in the lead-in there, almost none of which was accurate about this bill. First off, there's no risk to IVF in this country. All 49 Republican senators, along with President Trump, support IVF. No state restricts or bans IVF. Second, this bill was about a lot more than just IVF. You said that it had to guarantee access. Access is guaranteed in all 50 states right now. You also said that it was about IVF. It's about a lot more than IVF. This bill would mandate coverage for experimental, controversial procedures like cloning or gene editing or providing fertility treatments to men who think they're women. whatever that means. It would also imperil religious liberty. I support IVF, as President Trump does. We also think that we should allow, say, Christian hospitals to operate their affairs as they see fit, according to the dictates of their conscience. Now, it's not surprising that the Democrats don't agree with that.
That's Tom Cotton engaging with Caitlin Collins on CNN exactly the way you need to engage, pushing back on their presuppositions. And in fact, this is becoming more and more common. Scott Jennings, who's over at CNN, regularly now having to push back on the presuppositions because the reporters are just embracing the Democratic talking points as fact. And whether it's Tom Cotton or Scott Jennings are saying, wait, slow down, that's not actually true. And of course, the media hates to be called out and told they're pushing misinformation or disinformation when they regularly do it. And I want to talk about the misinformation and disinformation for a minute. If you're a longtime listener to the program, you know what my favorite book is. To Kill a Mockingbird. I love To Kill a Mockingbird. I read it regularly. I go back to it. The movie with Gregory Peck, the black and white movie, is fantastic. But I just have always loved that book. Always loved it. It was one of the first books that I really appreciated. Good American literature. The Iliad, the W.B. Rouse translation is my favorite of the. I love the Iliad. I was never, I realize it's going to be discrediting for some. I was never a massive Lord of the Rings fan like some of my friends. I liked it, but I got a buddy of mine who was telling me he rereads it every summer, all 3 books. I'm like, nah, I read it, and then I moved on. I always loved the Chronicles of Narnia. I like the Harry Potter series, but To Kill a Mockingbird, that's my favorite book. And in To Kill a Mockingbird, there's a character. And his name is Arthur Radley. Arthur Radley lives in a house down the street. It's not a very well kept up house. The yard's not well kept. And Arthur Radley murdered people. In fact, some people think Arthur Radley, he may be living in the house with the bodies of his dead parents. Nobody knows. But Arthur Radley, he is clearly no good, clearly bad, clearly a monster of some kind. And his family, if they're alive, they keep Arthur Radley locked up in that house. If you read the book, you know it's not true. Arthur Radley, Boo Radley, has a mental incapacity and has lived with his parents all of his life. And that's all it is they keep him sheltered from the world because he's different. He's got a mental, physical incapacity. And he turns out to be the hero of the book. I've been thinking a lot about Boo Radley with the stories of the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. Video circulated last night, and a number of people have emailed me and insisted I need to apologize to my audience because we now have evidence that the Haitians are stealing people's pets and eating them in Springfield, Ohio. The evidence is of a city hall meeting where a member of the council asks the city manager if he's heard anything about this. And the city manager says, yeah, I've heard it. I've heard it. Now, the city manager has told ABC News that it's not true. It's not happening. And now there are Republican activists who are attacking the city manager as a liar because of this video. Now, where I come from, a statement is not evidence. I can tell you something is true and it be a lie. Or I can tell you it's true because I heard other people say it was true and it was a lie, like with Boo Radley. He was not a murderous monster living in this house with possibly dead bodies in the house. Nope, he was a somewhat disfigured, mentally incapacitated man. But he was different. In that difference and his absence, it led the town to rumors. Here, there is no evidence of Haitians stealing people's house pets. And to be clear, that was the original accusation. Now, people have moved the goalpost and said now it's not that they were stolen, it's that they eat cats. Yes, they do. They also perform voodoo ceremonies with chickens. We haven't heard about the missing chickens in Springfield, Ohio, but voodoo is very common in Haiti. Wouldn't be surprised if there are some voodoo ceremonies going on among some of the Haitians. but there's no evidence they've been stealing people's house pets, and that was the original lie. J.D. Vance, when this started, said that there was a woman he talked to who's a constituent of his in Ohio who said the Haitians stole her cat, probably ate it. A Wall Street Journal reporter went to the woman's home, and she said actually the cat had run away. She assumed it was the Haitians that had gotten it, but the cat came back. The cat was there with her. So the cat that started all of this with J.D. Vance turns out to be alive and back in its owner's home. The video that was uncovered by Christopher Rufo of someone barbecuing a cat, and it looks like he's barbecuing a cat to me, is from Dayton, Ohio, a year ago from men from Congo, which is not in Haiti, but in Africa. The video of the woman who ate the cat, who was crazy, was an American woman in Canton, Ohio. There's no evidence of cats and dogs being stolen and eaten by Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. Given the habits of Haitians, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them have eaten a cat, but they haven't been stealing other people's cats and dogs. Here's my problem with this. Here's my problem. Do you know what's a true story? A true story is that a violent Venezuelan gang has taken over an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado, and when the locals started complaining, the Democrats said that's not true, and it turns out it was. The Venezuelan gang has also set up shop in El Paso, Texas, and they're even threatening local law enforcement. In Georgia the other day, 2 women were killed by a drunk illegal alien driving in a souped-up Dodge Charger. Now, I want you to think about that one for a moment. This is not your ordinary off-the-lot Dodge Charger. This is one with a bigger engine, higher horsepower, a racing machine, and it is very expensive. Where did the illegal alien who ICE was looking for, there was a hold on him from ICE, where did the illegal alien get the money to acquire the souped-up Dodge Charger? I would like to know the answer to that question. I don't know. I'm not suggesting a conspiracy. I'm just curious. How does an illegal alien in the United States of America afford a souped-up Dodge Charger that can go extremely fast, that collides into a Honda Accord and kills 2 American citizens and injures a child? There's a story there. All I'm asking Republicans is there are 47 days and 10 hours until polls open on Election Day in this country. Can we stop convincing ourselves that by telling exaggerated lies, we're doing ourselves a favor by forcing the media to look at a story? Can we stop that? Can we instead acknowledge that there are so many true stories, so many real stories, so many horrific stories out there that maybe we should focus on the true stories and not the lies? Because what the media is doing, I know you've convinced yourselves that now they're reporting on Springfield, Ohio, but they're not actually reporting on Springfield, Ohio. They're reporting that you're telling a bunch of racist lies about Haitians stealing other people's dogs and cats. And some of you believe it's true. And the problem is that these stories are taking on a life of their own and they become discrediting. For example, a story I didn't talk about several weeks ago, for which I got hate mail for not talking about it, that I was protecting Kamala Harris. The story was that Kamala Harris had hit and been a drive-by in 2011 hit-and-run incident that left a 13-year-old girl paralyzed. Now, I want you to think about that story. I didn't talk about that story. That story spread all over social media. I didn't talk about the story. And I got hate from people claiming I was clearly biased for Kamala Harris because I wasn't talking about this story. It surfaced on a news site for KBSF TV in San Francisco, and I looked at that news site, and you know I'm in TV and radio, and KBSF TV doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And I was a little bit curious, and I couldn't find anything about it. And people were upset. It turns out it was a Russian troll farm that set up this website and hired an actress who has now admitted she's the actress in the video talking about Kamala Harris being involved in the hit and run. And all I could think was, this is 2011. The media in California would have done something with this. Her Democratic opponents would have done something with this when she was running for office, and no Democrat ever attacked Kamala Harris, even when she was running in contested primaries. And it made it all over social media. It was a Russian troll farm. It turns out it appears it's a Russian troll farm that has orchestrated all the calls to all the schools in Springfield, Ohio, which again does raise the question of what the Biden administration is doing to deal with the Russian troll farms and things like that. There is a story today that I haven't talked about, and I have emails from people wondering why I'm not going to talk about it. That a car full of explosives was found at near a Trump rally in Long Island, New York. Donald Trump is doing a rally in Long Island, New York, and a car full of explosives has been found. The police say what happened is a man who was self-training, a crazy man, who is self-training a bomb-sniffing dog, at least that's what he says, reported that his dog detected explosives in this car. The dog is not really being trained to sniff explosives. It's a crazy man who's convinced he's training his dog to sniff explosives. The dog supposedly sniffed explosives in this car. The police said there were no explosives. It's not just the New York police saying there are no explosives. Turns out it's the Donald J. Trump campaign for president of the United States that also says the story isn't true. And yet, it's already taken over social media, and people want to know why yours truly is not talking about this story. I'm not talking about the story because the police say it's not true. The reporters in the area say it's not true. The local government says it's not true. And the Trump campaign says it's not true, even though people read it on the internet, so it must be true. We have 47 days and 10 hours left in this campaign, and I don't understand why we on our side have decided to tell lies instead of telling the truth, because the truth is far more damning and discrediting than the lies. And when we tell the lies about the dogs and cats of Springfield, Ohio being stolen and eaten, what's happening is the media gets to discredit us, and we don't get to challenge the presuppositions of the media. Tom Cotton is scoring points on CNN on Caitlin Collins by disrupting her presuppositions and the stories she tells. You tell the stories of all the Americans being killed and injured by illegal aliens, they can't debunk that story. It's true. You tell the stories of the gangs, they can't debunk those stories, they're true. You tell the stories of the increased cost in groceries and gas compared to when Trump was president, they can't debunk the story because it's true. And for some unknown reason, too many people on our side have decided they'd rather scratch and tickle their own ears with silly stories that are not true. And the media gets to focus on those instead of the true stories that actually could be used against Kamala Harris. In the meantime, turns out Boo Radley's not crazy and not a murderer, not a monster. He's just got mental issues and lives with his parents. Maybe many of the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio are like Boo Radley. The rumor in the neighborhood, because they're different, took on a life of its own, and people are convinced themselves of the truth, even though the truth is different. You can learn a lot from reading books. You can learn a lot from Hillsdale College as well, and you can go to erickforhillsdale.com today and learn so much for free from Hillsdale College. You can subscribe to their podcast network on your favorite podcast app and hear great conversations from Larry Arnn and scholars and others at Hillsdale College. You can subscribe to Imprimis and get it completely for free in your mailbox. You can subscribe and get Hillsdale College's great lecture series on the Constitution and citizenship from just fantastic scholars like Victor Davis Hanson, and it's all free. All you have to do is go to Erick, E-R-I-C-K, erickforhillsdale.com today. Go to erickforhillsdale.com. Sign up with Hillsdale College. You get the podcast for free. Get in your podcast app. Look for Hillsdale College's podcast network. Get Imprimis. It's show prep for your mind. I've learned so much from Hillsdale College. I've been getting Imprimis since I was in law school. Years and years ago now. Still paid off my law school loans and hadn't practiced law in a while. But I've been getting Imprimis. It's show prep for my mind. It's a great way to get involved with the conservative movement and to learn, not to be indoctrinated, but to get educated about this country and its founding. You get it all from Hillsdale College at erickforhillsdale.com. Howdy, welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. Glad to have you with me as I continue to alienate everyone, according to my email. Oh my gosh, people get super sensitive before the election. And I got to tell you, in my experience, all the people who email and say that they're never listening again, they wind up being the most passionate listeners. It's like Brokeback Trent from Tulsa. He listens every day so he can email me and tell me that he's not listening anymore. I got to play you this audio. This is too funny. This is from Dana Bash on CNN.
When you listen to Kamala Harris on what she will do, you can almost start a drinking game every time she says small businesses. Let me give you an example.
Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're going to put the good ideas, they're going to put the hard work into it.
Describe the politics of that.
When she says that, she also talks about being a middle-class kid. That's also at the front of her answers. If you look at the interviews they've been doing with local media, and they've opened up a bit more since the debate, the first question is often, what are you going to do to lower prices? Which is a very hard question for an incumbent party to answer. And it has implications that are very Trumpian. It is, Trump says he's going to do mass deportation. That'll decrease demand. Trump says he'll explore more energy. That'll decrease energy costs. Democrats can point to the fact that inflation is actually, it was bad 2 years ago. It's not now. What people want to hear is, how do you make the prices go down? So everything she says is something realistic that could survive a fact check that answers a very hard question.
She can't do it. She has no policy. Her policy is, I was the middle class. And the implied policy is, and you're never getting out of it. The opportunity for growth in this country is over with Kamala Harris as president, because she'll smother the economy until somebody else can come along and fix it. That's their policy.